So how do you play this damn game anyway?
Oops.
Ooh, wait, was the crack off? It was off?
Well, I didn't know what the hand motion was, and I went. Brett didn't go, and then he went, and then I finished, and yeah.
It's been apparently a little too
It's a rusty
long
crack.
since you guys have cracked it. Well, speaking of which, Brett is here.
Hey!
So it's like the first time we've done
Look
a
who finally showed
simultaneous
up.
crack.
Been a while for a coordinated crack.
Where you been? No.
Life.
It is time. Well, there was the opening crack, kind of, sort of cracks, whatever.
Yeah.
But welcome to another episode of Bards and Barrels. It's time for part 8 of our 10-part Candela Obscura series. It's a little crazy that we're on part 8. Phil, it feels like we just recorded all of this yesterday.
Yeah, kind of, but it's starting to feel like
Feels like
it's
it's
been a little while. But
So today we're going to be talking about, well, if you watched the YouTube video last week, we talked about like how to role play Candela Obscura as a player. So in the past, a few episodes ago, we talked about running the game and how that works, how you maintain, how you manage the mechanics and how you manage the players and the role playing. And now we've gotten into the player side of things. So we talked about the role playing and being in that system. And then now we promised you in that video that we were going to talk about like the actual playing mechanics. So here we go. Phil's going to lead this one. And then Brett and I are going to kind of play along with what Phil's throwing out there. I'm going to walk you through things more or less step by step, right?
that is the goal. Yes. You know how you do one of those things? You're like, oh shit, did we just like sign up for that? This is one of those things.
What did I get myself into?
No, so we're gonna talk through some of the mechanics. I think in the very first episode we kind of mentioned that this was based off of the illuminated world system as far as kind of how roles go. So the primary, role mechanic, hey, we're gonna bust out the dice in Candela Obscura, is for an action roll. So hey, if there's a question, like we get into a situation. So if we're all playing together, and let's say you've received a brief from your lightkeeper, you guys head out to make your initial investigation, and you see something that doesn't look quite normal, but between you and what you see that isn't quite normal is the periphery or the police force that's there. So how would you get around that? What would that look like?
That's not rhetorical. You actually want to know.
Oh yeah, I want to know. And I know you guys don't have a character sheet in front of you,
yeah.
but we can pretend we can use the one we
Sure.
created.
Yeah. So Alindra being our weird character that we created several episodes ago. So I guess my first thought was actually if you were a Slink character, not necessarily a weird character that we created, but it's like maybe potentially. So like they're like around where we need to go investigate, right?
So we'll set the scene a little bit better here. So you're in the red light district, and you have been tasked with investigating an unusual situation that has occurred in one of the taverns in that area. And as you go to approach that tavern, something immediately catches your eye that just looks off as you kind of take in this scene. But the other things that you notice in this area are a heavy police presence here that is between you and what you potentially wish to get a better look at.
Sure. Do they recognize us as being like members of Candela or anything to that effect?
I feel like that they would know who you guys are. They may not always agree with your methods.
Okay. Is there a crowd around?
No, not at this time.
No, so it's pretty quiet. It's just us and them for the most part.
Yes.
It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday morning.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that I would probably do in this situation would to maybe keep distance and kind of scout out the perimeter, like of the area, just to kind of like I know where something happened, where this event took place. I'm gonna kind of go around and see maybe where the police presence is like highly concentrated. Is there a back door that I can get in so I don't draw too much attention to myself?
Okay. So I don't know that I would normally make you roll for this, but just as an example of the mechanic, right? I feel like in essence you're trying to survey this scene and kind of see what is happening, see if there's another in. So if we wanted to practice an action roll, right? I would say, okay, hey, let's see what you can survey through this action that you're taking, and I'm going to have you make a survey roll. So, survey is one of the actions. It's listed under the intuition section. And as far as dice go, right, in Candela, I know we've mentioned it before, but you roll d6s in this game. So there is something in Candela known as the rule of six, just to kind of get that out there in the open. You can never roll a pool of dice that has more than 6 die in it. So that's the maximum number you ever can roll within one roll. To make your action roll, you'll look on your character sheet in the survey action and see how many of those little bubbles are filled in. If you have 1, you're rolling 1 dice, 2 dice, so on and so forth, right? You also, if you have 0, I guess we should address that because I'm looking at this character sheet and you
She's
got a 0.
some.
So if you have none, and you choose to just roll without expending any extra resources, you roll 2 d6s, and then you have to take the lower one. So basically, you're rolling disadvantage, right, in other mechanics. Now, one of the other components to an action roll is that characters have something that's called drive. So looking at this character sheet, she has 6 drives in intuition. So you can choose to burn a drive, right? Use up one of those drive to be able to add an extra die to the pool. So if we wanted to avoid rolling with disadvantage in this point, we could burn a drive.
Sure.
And be able to roll 1 die and use it instead of 2 die and taking the lower.
Sure.
Now, before we figure out what you want to do with your dice, before you make that determination, right? As the game master, it is my responsibility here to tell you what sort of stakes exist for this roll. This is a pretty low stakes roll here, right? So you're really just surveying the scene. You're not being belligerent. You're not trying to just get past them. Yeah, realistically, if anything, they might not even notice you doing this if you're just kind of skirting around the outsides, if you're not being blatantly obvious. So pretty low stakes here, which would typically mean lower level of consequences if you were to fail.
Sure.
There are 3 different sets of stakes. So low, normal, high. I'm going to double check the wording on that just to make sure that I match what they actually have laid out. But
Sure.
that's roughly what it would be.
So I think this is a good point to pause really quick because we've mentioned this in past episodes of kind of the freewheeling nature of Candela Obscura. So I think you've already seen that a little bit here. So Phil set the scene here, and then he asked me what I wanted to do, and then I just went in D&D. Quite oftentimes, you're playing along, and depending on your party makeup, at least amongst us and our group that we play with, we may get in a situation where I'm like, man, can I roll investigation on this? And then you as the DM would go, yep, sure, roll investigation. In Candela, you play until you reach a point where the DM needs an outcome to decide what happened. And that's what Phil said here, because you did specifically say normally, for the case of our example here, we're going to roll. But you said normally we probably wouldn't roll for this because it's pretty inconsequential, but we want you to see the process for doing this.
Yes.
But it still fit in really well because I just played until you said that we have reached a point where you need to roll for this. And then now you've laid out the stakes and I need to decide what I'm going to do.
Yeah. So that's kind of how that works, right? So the game master will call for the action roll, set the stakes, and then basically you as the player now can kind of have this conversation and figure out, okay, you know, what do I have in that action? First of all, do I have drives I can burn? Should I? Maybe depends on the stakes. And then the rest of your party as well, though, has the option to potentially try to help you in that situation too.
So I think in this instance, since it's a low stakes roll, perhaps this mystery is intriguing enough to me that I want to avoid being seen. So I don't want to roll this with disadvantage. So I think I would burn a drive so I can at least take the straight outcome of the D6.
You have them, use them.
Yep, that's exactly right. And in this particular instance, to me, this is probably either an inspect or an analyze, which is an intuition roll under focus. I have 6 drive. that I could use here potentially. So I'm going to use one of those drives. So on your sheet, the little boxes show what you have available. The big boxes are what you have used. I would fill out one of those columns, and then I would make the roll. I rolled a 2.
All right.
Boy, that's on
Done.
that vibe is about right.
So the scale on these rolls, right? So 1 to 3 is considered a failure. So typically you're not going to accomplish what you wanted, and there are consequences. 4 to a 5 is considered a mixed success. So in those instances, you would accomplish what you wanted to, but there's typically still a consequence. There's some sort of a cost associated with that. If you roll a 6, that's a full success. You get what you want without any complication. If you are rolling multiple die and you roll 2 6s, that's considered a critical success. So you get everything you wanted and a little bit extra.
Cool.
So was it a 2?
It was a 2.
Okay. So
It's right on par for me.
unfortunately, as you are kind of surveying the scene here and looking to see if there's maybe some sort of a back door, you catch out of the corner of their eyes, the periphery sees you sort of like in their minds slinking around the building, even though
I mean, they're right.
you aren't necessarily conducting your body language in that way. And one of them starts to slowly follow after you.
That's fine. I'm still probably gonna make my way around to try to. I know why they're here. They know why I'm here. I'm still gonna kind of scope out the situation.
And that would be a perfect example of how this would still fail forward, right? I think
Sure.
that's exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah.
So that is basically kind of how an action roll itself would work. So some other components that we need to talk about, though, are, and we've mentioned it in other episodes, but just want to make sure we get it kind of clearly defined here, a gilded die. So what is a gilded die? And how can we figure out if we have one, and what am I supposed to do with it? So a gilded die on your character sheet is going to be the diamond on the far left side of your actions, and if that is filled in, that is a gilded action that you have. So I'm looking at Alondra's character sheet here, the one that we filled out in our character building episode, and I can see that she has one in focus and she has one in read. So in those cases, right, if the GM calls for a focus roll or a read roll, she can still roll her 2 die there if she's not going to burn any drive, but one of the die is going to be different than all of the others. That one is the gilded die. So the book recommends maybe 2 different colors of die, something like that, just so you can keep them straight. The purpose of the gilded die is to be able to recover drive. So let's say she rolls her 2 die and she rolls a 3 and she rolls a 6. The 6 is on the non-gilded die and the 3 is on the gilded die. She could make the choice to take the failure, take the gilded die, and whatever consequence comes with that, but regain a drive if you take the gilded die.
Sure.
So, and it could be, it doesn't have to be a bad situation. Maybe she rolls the 6 on the gilded die. Best case scenario, right? Success, and you still get a drive back.
Right, and I think that's the mechanic that people playing this game are probably it's gonna take the most to get used to. But I think the key thing here is to remember you're not rolling dice near as much, because if your point of reference is basically any other TTRPG where you're rolling a lot of dice, that is not the case here. So don't think that you're going to be burning through drive left and right. Maybe in an intense situation you might burn through 2 or 3, depending on what those rolls are or something like that. But like, this is a prime example. I probably really wouldn't have rolled that in most cases because it was such an inconsequential thing. And my decision was to roll 1, even though I had 6 available. So there's still 5 there. I even rolled a gilded one, although I didn't say I was rolling a gilded die. So I actually could have gotten that drive back. I didn't really think about that, but I could have done that actually for that one.
Yeah.
So, but anyway.
And you have different sections. So you have drives within the different groups of actions.
Correct. Yes.
Yep. And it really, that gilded die, right, that mechanic is so you can regain the drive that you burn. So that's what it is there for.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you already mentioned. So it's like, even if you use up all your drive, you can still roll. You just roll 2 d6s and take the lesser value. You just roll with disadvantage. Because in the case of Alindra, any nerve roll, doesn't matter what it is, we have no drive for nerve rolls. So we would be rolling to a disadvantage anyway if we do something in that area.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. So one of the other mechanics when it comes to kind of the dice roll, the mechanics or the consequences piece of this is the resistances. So as a character, right, your resistance is your way to push back against a consequence. So if there's any time that you don't like the result of a roll, you can burn a resistance as long as that is in the same section as your action and you have one available. So if you're looking at a character sheet, your resistances are right underneath your drive. They're the 3 kind of downward pointing triangles. So if you have those filled out, that means you have a resistance in that set of skills or that set of actions. So maybe Ross doesn't like his failure. And
nope, I don't. Give me the dice back.
in intuition, right, we have some resistances there. So you could choose to burn a resistance and re-roll, but when you do a re-roll, you don't get any drive that you spent on that initial roll. And if one of your allies burns some of their drive to help you, you don't get that die either. So you strictly, like if we're taking a survey looking at Londra's character sheet here,
Yep.
you would roll disadvantage if you're doing a survey.
Sure.
Because you can't roll anything else with it.
So if I burn a resistance to re-roll my inspect or analyze in the focus, do I just re-roll the single die?
Nope. If you're doing your focus, because that's different. Focus you have 2 in, right?
Sure.
So you would roll 2 die and you could take the higher of the 2.
Okay. We're going to do that.
You wouldn't be able to burn a drive or anything extra.
Sure. You can't add to it.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Let's see what happens here. That's much better. I got a 6 that time.
Hey, see?
So look. So they don't
Worth
actually
it.
They
notice me.
didn't see you.
Of course they didn't. Look at me slinking around.
They're busy passing around the thermos, refilling their cups. One last thing I think we need to hit on before we kind of wrap this episode up. So marks and scars. So on the character sheet on the kind of right-hand side there, and I know we've talked a little bit about marks and scars, but that's where the tracking of these things go. So a mark, right, this is the harm that you would take during an investigation. So it falls into 3 different categories, and you can see them there on the character sheet. There's the body, which represents like physical harm to you. So if someone stabs you with a knife or you get shot with the gun, right? Something along that line, it's physical. The brain section represents some sort of mental strain. So this could be maybe you're in a highly tense negotiation and it doesn't go your way. Then you may be taking a brain mark, right? From almost the exhaustion of doing that. High anxiety situations, right? There's a lot of intensity in this game and your character feels that too. So if you're in a situation like that and it doesn't go your way, you may be forced to take a brain mark, or sometimes even seeing like some of the things that you come up against in Candela. Like they're so bizarre, so kind of grotesque that
Sure.
you may have to take a brain mark that way as well. And then lastly, bleed. So this is magical corruption, right? Potentially like exposure to phenomena. Maybe you touch a ghost, or I know in some of the Ross, you kind of in one of our other episodes, maybe it was the video I think we did for this, we mentioned the reflection type.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if your characters ever actually came face to face with that reflection, right, you would have taken a bleed mark.
Sure.
Like that's something, the magical phenomena would impact you. So you get 3 marks in each category. You can take 3. So I could take 3 body and 3 brain and 3 bleed and still be okay. But then when I take a 4th one in any category, that's when you sustain a scar at that point. This is a permanent change to your character, and we've talked about that in another episode, but this is a mechanical change and a narrative change as well. So once you do get that 4th one, you would erase your marks in the category you overfilled, come up with that scar, and that's what goes in one of those lines underneath there. You would fill that scar diamond in, and then make the change to your actions over on the left-hand side of your character sheet. You can take 3 scars, and then if you take a 4th one, you're done. And they have a little comment on there, I think, about like Basically,
Yeah.
talk to the DM about your demise.
Your final moments. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think something that fits here that we haven't talked about, and I think we should talk about it really quick, is that you as the GM, can you hand out those marks for pretty much anything?
Yes.
Without me rolling too. So it's basically, if there's a situation that we find ourselves in, you can assign a mark based on what happens in that situation without ever rolling dice.
Yes, and I think one of the very first ones we played, that's actually from the book, that happens. Like as even just as you witness something, like you don't have a save, right? There's nothing like a save in this game as far as that goes. So you saw it, you take the mark.
Sure. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, okay, before we get out of here, though, so what are our general feelings on the mechanics of this game? Because I think I have two sets of feelings. I have, on one hand, I'm like, this is a really pretty simple, straightforward game. On the other side, there's certain pieces, much like the gilded dice, that have a learning curve to them. What are you guys feeling?
I feel like this is version 1.0 of their character sheet. And it could be laid out a little bit cleaner to translate some of that information.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I think it gets a little bit confusing. Like with the gilded dice, like it's just a mark on there. It doesn't have any sort of like frame of reference for what that is.
Right.
And once you follow it and understand what it is, super simple to look at and glance at any character sheet for Candela and understand. Until that point,
it can be
you gotta take a minute and look what it actually research it a little bit.
I agree, and especially when like you think of like a D&D player sheet, like if we're thinking about like little filled in boxes, that's your proficiencies in D&D quite often. That's the only thing that you're filling in, little boxes like that. Whereas you look at this player sheet and your gilded actions, gosh, I can't think of the word. Gilded actions are marked that way. Your drives are marked that way. You have to basically mark what drives you're using to keep track of those. By the way, if you're using an actual player physical sheet, use pencil, because you need to be able to erase those and come back to that. Your resistances are filled in little bubbles, so there's just so many of those. And we didn't even get to the point where we like talk about the actions that you can use from your role and your specialty. Again, that's a little thing that's filled in. And Brett, before we were even started this episode, we were looking at the character sheet, and he looked at this and he's like, well, what are those? Well, they're actions, but the only one you get is the one that's filled in. But typically in like a D&D player sheet, the only stuff that's on your sheet is the stuff that you can use. So it's like kind of the opposite in some ways. It is somewhat confusing. I get that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, coming from D&D, right? You don't erase things from your character sheet. You know what I mean? Like you level up and you add some stuff, but you're not ever, maybe hit points, if you're erasing and actually writing your hit points on your screen or on your sheet. But in Candela, that's a constant ebb and flow, right? Using drives, gaining them back with gilded dice, taking marks, healing marks, which is something you can do between assignments with some circle actions. So yeah, there's just a lot more, I guess, character sheet management, maybe.
It's a little more involved.
Yeah.
It's closer to D&D, like on paper and pen when you like first start, like old school D&D where you actually had to fill out your sheet by hand.
Sure. Yeah. And we're not even talking about the circle sheet. There's a whole separate sheet for your circle, because you keep track of things there too, and your circle has abilities too. So we didn't even talk about that.
I don't know if we have enough.
We don't have enough time. There's not enough beer here tonight to do that. At least not in my mind. Anything else before we get out of here? I think this is a super approachable game. I do love playing it, and it's just, I think there's some little quirks that new players may find odd the first time they play.
I definitely think the first time. So I think the first one we ran was definitely a learning experience, just with the character sheet and how the actions work and gilded dice. But I think the more of it we play too, like that we've played as a group, it is natural, like it comes to you, but it's just it's a shift, initially.
Right.
And focus on the role play. Don't get bogged down in the
because you won't use it that
right.
much.
Yeah.
Truthfully.
But it's like but that could be also part of the problem too, because like you don't use it enough to really
Yeah.
understand it at
That's
the
fair.
beginning. That's hard too. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I agree but disagree at the same
It's
time.
the game master's problem, not yours.
Yeah, that's exactly right. As long as you know how to run it, Phil,
Good
we're
luck,
good.
GMs.
We're good to go. That's going to do it for this episode of Bards and Barrels. You can listen to past episodes of the show anywhere podcasts can be found. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, TikTok, YouTube at Bards and Barrels. Stay tuned. We're going to wrap up here next week, episodes 9 and 10, and then Candela's done. So we'll see you on the flip side.